I did it, Bala. I did it.
Okay, thanks. Vim, you always beat me.
I don't know.
Yeah, cool. So that's one thing that was running in my mind as well. This is uh so Tal, I mean also other things, did you figure out why are they open to experimental at all, or they don't want to go by that route?
Um, well, they are quite, you know, persistent and wanting to show a real contribution in FEO, and they feel that they've presented this and that it should be accepted as a contribution. So I really don't want to create any misunderstandings or bad feelings, and I think maybe we should, you know, discuss and formalize our process for accepting contributions, because yeah, we 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 value all contributions and all proposals. We don't accept all of them for various reasons, right? In my personal opinion, accepting this at this point into the SDK is not a great idea, because when we put something in a distribution, if this will become part of R2, then it builds expectations, right? And of course, we can always change our mind and remove code later, but that could create even more damage towards potential contributors. But
I think
yeah.
irrespective of the way, I was not thinking this will become part of R2.
Yeah.
Well, but that's the point. Anything that comes into as a PR to the main repositories, that is our distribution. Please go ahead, Boone.
Yeah, I mean, so here is how I look at the situation, or at least my view after all of these discussions is the following, right? So we have put the content for R2. I think at the moment it's 4 items, probably it's 3, right? And then we have proof of concepts, right? My idea was or the way I understood is that everything that's proof of concept doesn't go to the main Nefio repo, but will be either an experimental or somewhere outside of Nefio, right? You have the choice. And this is, so you do that to basically show your proposal and gain interest from people. And if we believe as a community that we should adopt some of this, the next release for these proof of concepts is the vehicle to get it into main. Right? That's how I was always understanding the whole thing. And we created experimental as a vehicle for companies that said, okay, I want to contribute to Nefio, but you have the license, you sign the license of Nefio, and as a result, the code becomes part of Nefio, let's say copyright and stuff like that. But on the other hand, you could do similar things outside. But for me, anything that is classified as proof of concepts should not go into the main Nefio repo.
Cool, thanks.
I
Thanks
tend
for
to
the
agree
guidance,
with
Vim. Yeah, I think I had some reservations as well with this. So Vish, go ahead, and after that I will level set for Stephen who joined late. Go ahead, Vish.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I joined about 6 or 7 minutes late when the conversation started. So which
So,
contribution are we
so
talking
can
about?
can I level set for both
Okay.
you and Stephen? Then you can go.
That'll be great.
Okay, cool. Okay. So the context of this conversation is yesterday Ashish from Samsung expressed his desire to push a PR for the tool, the Helm to operator tool that they have uh, presented to us, and it is also has been in discussions as one of the ways that we can onboard Helms into Nefio. So initially, I mean, they presented to us, I mean, they showed us the working demo as well, I think. And then Tal created the experimental repo. And when Tal created the experimental repo, this was the one of the foremost use cases that he had in his mind to put the code into this particular tool. The experimental repo's purpose is to put all the POCs or proposals, etc., whatnot. some of which could eventually become a part of Nephew, some of which may not. So with that said, that's the backdrop of this. And then I think Ashish and Sandeep from Samsung expressed their desire to directly push this particular tool as a part of SDK into the main Nephew repo instead of pushing into experimental repo. I mean, there are obviously some concerns with that because we are still deciding what ways we need to solve this particular problem domain. Our SDK is not only about Helm; it's beyond Helm. Helm is a part of the solution at this point of time, even though it's a bigger part of the solution, bigger part of the problem statement. So that's where we are. Whether we should accept it in the main repo or not. If we accept it in the main repo, in what shape and form, or should we definitely suggest them to go with our proposed path of put it in experimental, let's take a look at it, and once it matures, let that propagate into the main Nephew repo. That's the crux of the discussions we are having. With that, yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah,
then, yeah.
Thank you. So is this like supposed to be core of Nephew? Is this considered like, we cannot have, without this, you cannot run Nephew?
No, this is a tool. This is a developer tool.
Okay, that's what I was trying to understand, the differentiation, because for example, somebody else probably wants to have their own implementation of their Helm, I guess. So this will probably, if there's something called a Nephew tools repository, maybe this will probably go there. Is that what you were also discussing earlier? Seems like.
So no. So SDK is an approved feature of Nephew. It will be a Nephew official thing. This particular feature is in our current development cycle, whether or not this should go into Nephew or Project Nephew project versus Nephew experimental. That's worth discussing. But then Nephew SDK is part of Nephew mainline. I don't think that's even question.
Yeah. Just wanted to differentiate. I think Vish's question was not that. Vish's question was, can Nephew run without this? So this is not a runtime component. That's what I was trying to clarify. This is approved project in by TSC and everyone, of course, but I don't think this is not like Porch, without which Nephew will not.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to ask.
Yes,
because it should be optional.
The SDK. The SDK as a whole is
and Porsche is not even an Nephew project, right?
Yeah, so. Absolutely.
Yeah, because I think we should clarify. I think first of all, Stephen, I sorry to jump the line, guys, but I think if I look to the thing that we agreed upon, SDK was in the proof of concept section, right? So as such, I think it will become a mainstream thing, but it's not. The proof of concept is a deliverable for R2, but not the mainstream. SDK is not a deliverable for R2. Are we agreeing on that or not? Do we agree on that or not?
Right, yes, that's an important distinction. We have POCs that have been approved to be part of the R2, right? And there are POCs that haven't been discussed as being approved, right? That's an important distinction. Not all POCs are the same.
Yes.
And R2 deliverable. My thing is that in terms of material deliverable for R2, when I don't think this is a part of it, as per the plan.
So I mean, if you look to we can look at the document, right? So it's clear, I think. So we can look at the document. For me, there was a clear line on POCs, right? And this was definitely part of it, right? So Nephew SDK was part of it.
Yes,
but not as the core of Nephew in R2.
Yes. The core of the Nephew R2 is obviously OAI core and RAN and multi-vendor improvements that you have been working on, and then the technical depths, various technical depth, process, product, documentation. Yeah. And of course the topology controller that Stephen is working as. Yeah. So I think I think that one is clear on that one. What is the scope of this R2 is? That itself we are going to slip the dates, I'm sure. with that said, probably, Fiacra, please go ahead. I'm sorry, you have raised your hand.
No, thanks, Val. I guess I'm probably not entitled to have an opinion on this, but I'll give it anyway. But if I'm not wrong, there is no SDK as such yet, right? It's still in design phase. It's still theoretical to a lesser degree, right? But I don't think there's any kind of, we can have a vote, but I don't think there should be a discussion about whether the tools should live in POC or not. I think it has to, like, it has to be incubated. It has to be, before it's brought in. Yeah, I have a lot of opinions, but yeah, maybe it's not relevant. But yeah, I don't think I don't think there should be a discussion really whether it should be in POC or not. It exists and it exists in POC really.
Right.
We can be. I think we can tie ourselves in knots trying to be diplomatic. And I think if we want to be diplomatic, we can do a show of hands here now. And vote on it, or should go through a more official channel. I don't know, TSC or the equivalent.
So I think, yeah, absolutely, we could do that. I would like to ask Stephen about that. Before that, we have Victor. Victor, do you have any insights? Do you have anything to share? Since it's probably your sister team working on this.
Sorry, about what specific? No, I was just
Sorry.
So what was the question, Bala? Like, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, is this the SDK stuff that is coming from Samsung? Since you are the only guy I saw, I thought. Yeah, I thought of asking your opinion. Sorry to put you on spot.
No. No, definitely, I'm not fully aware of that. So I need to check. You say Akash was the person. I need to reach probably internally, but I'm not I'm not fully aware of the SDK. Probably need to educate myself. They're trying to.
Yeah, Tal, please.
Yeah, Stephen, so I have a question. I'm a little confused at this point. So I know we have created an SDK repo in the main Nefio project group, right?
I'm actually typing a response to that. Let me finish typing that too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So the original intent when I created this is to, against what Bala is saying, I do think some of the SDK issues would be better tracked outside of the Nefio repo, because A is POC, so let's not saturate all the things that file against Nefio. And it is actually on, at least temporary, would be on some sort of a different release cycle, because it's a separate, completely separate tools that isn't part of a Nefio bundle. But then the tools could come in say the middle of the release cycle and say that, oh, I support the last release, until the effort can actually catch up to release at the same time. And the goal obviously is they would be released at the same time. But then it is possible.
Are you proposing then that maybe we do most of our work in Nefio experimental on the SDK rather than in the
yeah,
main?
I don't disagree with at this point. No.
Okay, well, if we do that, that might be a good move because it will show that we are not. I think that the issue here, and it's very delicate, we don't want to show Samsung that we're privileging other contributions over theirs, right? So if we move everything to experimental regarding the SDK, then nobody is privileged, right? And then we have the meritocratic system to examine those POCs. So that would be good. However, I think that might conflict with my understanding regarding R2 planning, because I understood that we want to show something regarding the Nefio SDK in R2. I know there's a lot of pressure from the TSC to show anything at all regarding an SDK, even if it's very preliminary in R2.
So there are a couple of things, right? There's things that are committing. So we didn't commit the team to deliver something at the R2 timeframe. There are efforts that are expected that we'll be able to get this. So obviously at TSC level there is a desired that when we do the PR for, I hope the press release, PR is for so many different things. The press release for R2, that would be a great item to say, oh, now we have tools for vendor onboarding. But then again, when we work with SIG1 on what being part of SIG2, when we work with SIG1 to narrow down what we can actually deliver for R2, we kind of said probably not, in terms of like having a workable SDK where people can use, and it will be onboarded directly. I think it's probably on nothing more than like a experimental stage, if you will. It'll be like a 0.1 type stuff that may be actually available if the community's up for it to build it. But I don't think we ever committed to saying that, you know, SDK, it would be an R2 SDK. Actually, there will actually be an R2 SDK that support R2 CLDs and things that work with R2 Nephew. But then it may not actually be releasing at the same time as R2.
Okay. To be honest, I don't think we're ready to show anything at all in R2 for the SDK. I mean, I think we did really great groundwork and research, but we really have nothing. I mean, we haven't even aligned on using the operator SDK entirely. We have various questions open. So I want to make a suggestion here to maybe not touch the repo. So we put a placeholder repo for the SDK in the main Nephew project org. I would suggest not touching it for now. It's just a placeholder. And whatever work we do, let's do it in Nephew experimental. And that way Samsung's contribution can live there too. And it won't be privileged beyond anything else. I mean, to be very, very fair to them, we have not done a very deep as a community. You know, we tested Flux quite a lot. We tested Operator SDK quite a lot. We have not reviewed their contribution very deeply. And because we haven't seen it yet, right? So it's, we haven't had the opportunity. So I want to suggest just to keep a really even board here, to be very diplomatic about it, just to put all our work on the SDK, let's put it an FEO experimental for now. This follows WIM's principle too, which I think is very correct, right? If the code is still in a POC, then it should not be in the main org. What does everybody think of that?
I'm fine, absolutely fine with that assessment. I think I wish we had either Ashish or Sandeep here. I mean, both of them are not here, but probably we'll have to convey the message just like you said, Tal. You know, I mean, it's actually absolutely a it's not, we absolutely value the tool and we absolutely see the value because they demonstrated that, and we would like to see it in the experimental, and then people can use it, make suggestions, even augment the tool if the need be, things like that. Yeah, but yeah, we should definitely encourage them to put it there, and then we should do it.
I'm surprised we put 30 minutes on this discussion, because I thought on 6.3 meeting yesterday we sort of recommended Ashish to check it into experimental already.
No, we didn't.
Oh,
Ashish is under the impression that he's going to check into the main.
Oh no, well, I thought we were asking him to do it there so that we can check all the basic pre-submits. That's why we were asking Rado that making all the PRAO and things working, so that we'll get the same experience first on the experimental.
True.
No, he reached out and said that he wanted to check into SDK, which was not the intent for me to create a SDK, because the SK repo is there for issues. I talked about that actually during one of these meetings, that we can start filing issues, which are more like POC issues, but it's still issues that we can track separately. But then after that, we are not. So I mean, earlier there was less of a binded rules, I would say. That, well, A, when I created this, the experimental wasn't there yet. B, I think it's general ideas that maybe we park stuff on the experimental. It wasn't like a rules yet. I mean, even now I'm not sure there's a rule for saying that because Tao make that suggestions. I don't know whether or not this is something, this is actually even my thing, this is like 3 thing. Whether or not we absolutely cannot have any POC level things into the main repo. Or I think what Tao said is the main repo, everything that we're looking to do only for released, and anything that isn't for release, we shouldn't go into the main repo. I think that actually, that rules, I'm not sure whether or not we cannot enforce, and B, the release cycle is by trains, so things that doesn't make release, even though if it sits there. It's what we actually decided as a community, that we're running some sort of release train with things that may or may not make it there on a released, even though maybe the code is actually in the repo already, then we have to turn it off somehow. So I mean, for one thing, so a lot of Google Seed code, for example, we're sitting on the main repo, and then so I mean, again, I mean, I'm not saying yes or no. I'm just saying this suddenly becomes such a big discussion point because we have an experimental, and then the experimental has been kind of a bit of a fluff in terms of what really governance models around it, and then now if we are going to have POC only, but then and then the idea would be, let's say R3 we want to, or R3 timeframe we want to have an SDK, then we suddenly have to have a graduation criteria implemented.
Sorry,
which is not there, right? Which is actually when an experimenter was created, we deliberately write the wording such that this is not a co-parking place. There's no expectations that doing it there or doing it anywhere first would give you an expedited path of going into an FEO. So I mean, again, I'm not saying this to dispute any of this, and community obviously has a desire that this should go into experimental, and I don't disagree with that. It's just that it suddenly becomes such a very strong argument for blocking things from coming in, which is, sort of alarming actually in my side. But yeah, go ahead, Hal.
So I just want to reiterate the distinction I tried to make earlier between approved POCs and community POCs. So SIG1 really, as part of its R2/R3 planning at this point, included POCs. We want them as part of the distribution. We want to show a POC for ORAN. We want to show a POC for Tosco. We want to show a POC for well, it grows.
Also SDK. So it is on a SIG1 document. It is approved.
Exactly.
It is approved. Yeah.
Right. That's my point. So in that respect, those are part of the distribution, and we are also presenting it, as part of our release notes. Hey, Nefio R2 includes some POCs, right? We're not committing. We're making it clear the status of these features, that they're not intended to be long-term support, but rather proof of concept that might change in the next release. So that's one kind of POC, and Operator SDK generally is part of that. However, I think we're making POCs for the POC, right? If you understand the distinction I'm making, right? So we do want to include Operator SDK and R2, something. We might not be ready to do that, right? As we said, we did not commit to a deadline. But this is a POC for that POC, right? So on that level, it has not been approved. It is not part of, something that we want necessarily to showcase for R2. But obviously, this particular contributor wants that to be showcased. So that is the issue before us.
Okay.
I hope that's clear.
Go ahead, Liam.
Yeah, sorry, I'm driving and I came into the call late, so I missed maybe the beginning context. But just on the SDK work, there are things that we're going to need to do, which I think really we probably need to figure out ourselves using the POC approach, like, for example, life cycle management, or do we want to do anything more for for auto generation from Helm than what we're doing today? And I mean, we have some ideas about how we might do that, but we don't know enough to go and even say what we'd actually do with that yet. And I think that's what is appropriate in an SDK. Is appropriate for the SDK to have, But I don't think even I think it'll be the R2 and into the R3 timeframe before we actually know enough about how we want to do these things, but to actually bring them into the mainstream. Sorry about the background noise, and I hope I'm not tripping out and going through bad areas there. But that's kind of my 2 cents worth.
Right. So there's the dependencies on the main Nepio systems that needs to have some sort of compatibility checkings across the package that are generated by the SDK and what is actually currently running on Nepio. So that as an official thing, once we have it released in terms of saying that a release SDK that would work with, say, R2 or R3, it probably doesn't make R2 anymore, that being a criteria. Then at that point, obviously that needs to be part of the actual Nepio released, that let's say compatibility checking controller needs to be sitting on Nepio when we launched, and it's always running. And so that is the dependencies of a check of an SDK that is on release quality. And if we do support an SDK for R2, not to be confused. That's why I want to create a different repo to do this. Not to be confused with releasing at the same time as R2. But then if it's an SDK that was built that is compatible with R2 CLDs and R2 the rest of the R2 pieces of Nepio, even though if it's beta on also that one type thing, we may or may not have that available, and that would be something we release document onto the thing. I mean, it's various different of qualities when we do something, and then this is obviously not at the timeline where we can actually release an R2 that would make it available as a tools that we recommend all the vendors to start using, because there are other systems dependencies that we may not have yet. But then again, if the discussion is whether or not Samsung's Helm to operator, I think actually, should go into the SDK repo on Nepio project versus the Nepio experimental, going to experimental actually makes a lot more sense in that case. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think the one thing we need to do is, yesterday I told him, since his eventual expectation was to push it to the main repo, we asked him to start with the unit testing coverage. I'll send a note to Ashish.
Yeah.
You know, not to spend.
Yeah, I didn't hear a lot of resistance from him by saying that let's go into experimental. So I was surprised that was. I guess we'll have to reach out to him and make sure that this is.
I'll send a message, Stephen. Then I would actually encourage both them to join a meeting, maybe maybe SIG automation meeting, or maybe a next week's release meeting, or then probably we can guide them, and then we can try to convince them.
Yeah, I mean, 6.3 meeting is a little late for them, so I'm not. Hopefully they're available.
Yeah, I think we'll see. I'll just send that note to both Sandeep and see what they have to fix. So, is there any other recommendations? Any other comments from the
recommendations of what? Yeah. So we're making that recommendations to Ashish, and as a community, we converged on let's do as much as possible on the experimental first.
Yeah.
Before we're actually moving into SDK. And besides, as you said, it doesn't even have unit tests, so it's not going to make it to Nepio project. That is actually the number one ground rule. That's the number one ground rules. I mean, we'll immediately reject something that doesn't have unit tests. So.
Yeah. So this group, the way we've been working so far, and I think it was quite productive, is that we have various options on the table. A few documents and a lot of presentations, and we're going through option by option and evaluating it and collecting data. So we welcome Samsung's contribution of yet another option. We need a chance to actually evaluate it. So I think it makes a lot of sense. Let's put it in Nepio experimental, because none of us has seen the code yet. So if we have the code there, we'll be able as a group to look at it closely, evaluate it, collect data, and decide what to do next, right? We're not not privileging it, and we're not privileging it. We have a meritocracy, and those are the rules that I hope we all are able to play with. So anyway, I feel like we said a lot, and it's not fair that they're not here.
I know. I don't know why this discussion gone on for 40 minutes without the affected party being present.
Yeah.
But anyway, so no, I mean, it's great to converge on this. It does affect the SDK, so it is worth discussing on the SDK, and then maybe we set the ground rules that at the before R2, we're not checking anything into the SDK repo in FEO project, because it's not part of the release. So anything that goes into any integrated works that we may actually do from now till R2 released, it would still be parked in experimental.
Cool. I think that's the conclusion. I will send the message to Ashish not to.
That's it. There is actually a deliverable for SDK for R2. I think that was agreed on automations, that they want us to actually have a checked-in document for some of the evaluations that we've done.
Yes, yeah, that's
Yeah,
accepted.
so that one probably should go into the SDK repo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll send a note to Ashish, and then probably I'll request them to join one of our meetings, and hopefully we can convince them. Yeah, hopefully they'll understand, because we absolutely value that tool, value their contribution. It's just that we want to follow the processes to align with the rest of the community. Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Tal, for bringing that up and discussing. So Stephen, floor is yours. We are waiting for you.
Okay. I know. Sorry about that. I didn't expect traffic congestions. I mean, it's Silicon Valley, so I expect traffic congestions, but I didn't expect traffic light to be fixing on like 3 straight traffic lights. So actually, I think what we talked about last week was generally there is a Helm discussion fatigue in the community and the team, within the team. So I think what we were talking about is let's kick off a POC which is a little more end-to-end. So right now, Fiacre already did most of the work. That we know he has shown us that on Flux it works. He has shown us that when it's on Operator SDK, it can work. So all of these are isolated things where we upload a Helm charts either through CLDs or for values.yamls that are pushed into a repo, and it spin up something. That spins something on the workload cluster, on a target cluster. So great. So now if we integrate that with the rest of Nephios, how would that look like? I think that would be tremendous data points to see how it goes, because I think everyone knows that it goes without saying that there has to be a piece where it takes the Nephio CL and then translating some part of it into an input. And then I think that could be commonly used across different mechanisms of the Helm installations, of the Helm onboarding. So I think that would make it for an interesting use case. Though if we do end-to-end from PBS all the way down to using Helms to actually spin up a FreeFileGC network functions, or actually just multiple even, that would give us a very strong data points of see what the operation looks like. Because there's things like if the Helm chart needs to be stored in a GitHub, how would that work on a full model? So that's what I would actually suggest in terms of kicking off more of a end-to-end PLC, if you will. Any opinions?
So just on that, so sorry, Vim, you go ahead.
Yeah.
You go first. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was after.
No,
you,
very quick one. So I guess that integration point, has that been defined, or that's still outstanding? Like the as you said, the integration between whatever mechanism we use to manage the Helm charts and the integration point into Nephio. and that custom resource, does that have to be, that API needs to be defined, doesn't it really? And
yeah, so a couple of things, right? So you are, so we would like to be able to show a case where I think there are different opinions, obviously, on things, but then right here we're trying to use Helm onboarding as a Helm as a tools that would actually spin up the network functions, because that's actual Helm onboarding, at least for day one, and then and that would means that you are immersed into the entire Neptune experience, and that would be saying that we're using the same PBS, we're using the same specializers, and then we're sending you the same NF deployment, but then there'll be an absence of the actual 35GC operator that we wrote. And then instead of using that to do deployment config map service, we'll use Helm to do it. But then this would be based on the NF deployment plus whatever extension things that you would need for 35GC, which, to be honest, not a lot. So that would basically be a interesting data point to see the end-to-end operations of using. Actually, I would encourage doing both.
So the existing NF deployments, custom resources would be.
I would strongly recommend if there are enough contributors, do both Helm operators and Helm controllers, and then see what the operation workflow looks like. If we're really ambitious, I would even go and start creating CLIs on top of operator SDK. So that would also give the user experience of, like, if I'm a vendor, I get the tools, I can start. This is my Helm chart, or this is. On Flux case, you're not even pointing to a Helm chart, right? In this case, we have to somehow integrate which Helm charts are we talking about, type things, because now the CLD actually matters instead of like generating values.yamls and push it into a gig repos later. So I mean, there are points to discuss, but then it would, by doing this, I think is a much better, even for the thought process, it would be much easier for us to think how we actually do it, how do we integrate the Helm onboarding pieces into the entire Nephew pictures. So that's what I would strongly recommend to take on next. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, my recommendation is to first of all show how it will work architecturally, right? Because I think I pointed out a few times already that unless you do have some logic on the workload cluster, it's going to be very challenging to do, right?
Yeah, no, I don't think anyone just built that. Yeah, because obviously
go ahead. What I'm trying to say is that's why I'm suggesting let's before doing a lot of POCs, right? Show how it architecturally will work, because it will potentially help reduce some effort that might not result in something that we can use eventually, right? So that's, I think, my recommendation is just show how it architecturally works before you do a PLC, because it will.
I think we should draft a document on I mean, you know, it's a group effort to see what we want to execute if we were to build this. Yes. I do think it's worthwhile to build the PLC at the end anyway, to basically showcase that it is actually doable.
I mean, if we understand that the architecture is feasible, then of course we should.
Yeah. I think we should.
What I'm trying to say.
Obviously, we should draft a document before just go and duck into the code and do it.
Yeah, that's
yeah.
because from my perspective, maybe just quickly, I see the discussion on Helm has gone in two directions from my perspective, how I understand it. One is, let's use an application, not necessarily our network functions or Free5GC, and let's use Helm to install an existing application that is not hydrated through Nephew itself, right? So that has been one conversation, and where I do see Flux as a potential option, or as an option actually. And then there is the other thing is like Nephew-based network function deployment. Those two are very different conversations.
Yeah. So
I have the feeling.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I have the feeling that we blur the two together sometimes, and I think we should make a distinction between the two somehow.
Right. So I just want to question if the former has anything to do with Nephew.
No, correct. But okay, we have had this conversation already, right? So
Mhm.
that's why I'm
Yeah.
trying to make it clear is that,
Mhm.
okay, let's be
Yeah.
clear what we talk about. Are we talking about the
Mhm.
network function in the Nephew scope, or are we talking
Yes.
about
So
on the
we
general,
would,
right?
yeah. So I'm always impressions that when we build the SDK, we are trying to see if we can onboard user Helm charts for the network functions into Nephew, and at least to some level of day one deployment as either a transition tools or maybe some way for them to be plugged into Nephew on a day one perspective. Because, you know, SDK always takes the vendor's perspective. And the vendor perspective would be, I don't think they will stop developing Helm charts. And then maybe, you know, for as I said, I think during the summit, even for medium term, is a possibility that we do have to continuously support their life cycle of their Helm charts, at least for day one. So Tao and I, and actually you, have talked about day two things where we can clearly articulate and prove that you need to use an operator to do day two things. And I do want to do that. And then making sure that even if they do Helm for day one, they still need operators, and then SDK will help them build that operator for day two operations. But then that's just one of the pictures that is possible to emerge out of this. But that would be what architecturally, as you said, would be more interesting, because now we're trying to onboard a network functions where the executions of the deployment and things would be done by Helm, and all the extra parameters that would come in that would not be supported by Nephew CLs. And it'll be able to deliver through Helm as the vehicle, and deploy the network functions. I think that's the interesting problem that we're trying to actually try to look at, and the POC to prove to ourselves that it actually does work. I do see, like, operationally that may not be very clean and kludgy, but then that's why I want to, like, see if it's really something that is not acceptable by users, because we're now presenting, like, oh, now you have to create another Helm charts GitHub, a gig repo, to store your Helm charts. That may be kind of weird for users, but then we do have to present that before we kind of strike it. But in any case, that would be my view, obviously. Liam, sorry.
Yeah, I'm just wondering what your thoughts are about LCM, or say pre and post operations, because I got asked this question internally and I struggled a bit to give an answer, because
The LCM of the Helm or LCM of the network functions itself?
Well, I think
the LCM of the Helm charts, because now you want to have a story that we can upgrade, downgrade.
Well, no, it's really the Helm hooks thing. So it's an equivalent mechanism in Nephew to that. So I mean, can you?
Yeah, so we do on that. So I think we make that clear for many discussions that the more advanced Helm features that are mainly used for more day two operations should be subsumed eventually by Nephew. So we have to make a stand somewhere. We have to make a stand somewhere, and I think we can't just sit there and say that forever and ever Helm experience is the only thing we'll support for vendor onboarding. Yeah, we'll make a stand saying that.
I wonder in the SDK. Well, it's not really an SDK thing, I suppose, but should we think about how we do that before we start saying how do we adapt that Helm to it? Do you know what I mean? So if we think about how we'd actually handle existing workloads, say we have to change a database schema or something, how would you, in Nephew, forget about Helm, do that? And then we can, once you do that, you know where you want to go to, and you can say, well, that's how we'd handle it. Helm needs, in the SDK, we can translate towards that. But if we don't know what we're translating towards, we'll end up having Helm in there for those sorts of use cases.
Meaning that when we have a change of the CLD from a release to release, how would that propagate it? So actually, we had that experience right now for L2. We're kind of deprecating all the UPF, AMF, SMF deployments into a centralized NF deployment.
But it's
so R1, R2 is not great because we kind of say just forget about R1.
Yeah.
And then there's no backward compatibility. But that's a good point. I think we should talk about how to do that, even in context of here and also in SIG2 meetings.
Say you have an existing. In the case where you have an existing NF and you want to have a hook into the NF to tell it to do something, is there a way of doing that? You know, that's probably needed too.
Okay.
maybe if we thought about that, because I think translating the Helm charts statically into Kubernetes resources into kept package is something that's doable. It's actually that's kind of a modeling kind of mapping problem, but it's actually the semantics of the upgrades of the. I'm
Yeah.
don't
So
worry so much about
as far as the
is something
SDK goes, we're thinking of supporting both models. Obviously, the Samsung piece is specifically built to take your Helm and forget about just CLD. They generate a auto-generated operator. And there's also obviously cases where you can easily translate Helm into manually, or hopefully in the tool in the future that would translate that into a kept package. That's one side of the equations if we want to build that. And the other side of the equations is the Helm operators and things are actually sitting. So can we get that as part of the experience? Because that would be natively supporting Helm without actually asking vendors to change them, at least for some limited way of deployment.
or even
day one
more,
deployment.
even going further, it's not even supporting Helm, it's actually providing that feature in Nefio, because I think non-Helm workloads need that sort of feature functionality as well. You know?
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead, Tal. Sorry.
Yeah,
Is that all you have, Liam? Or do you have any more comments, Liam? Sorry.
That's all I wanted to know.
Yeah, thanks.
So
Yeah, no, you're right.
I
Yeah,
want-
absolutely.
I want to try to summarize maybe and add, one more point of complexity. But Wim's point is very well taken. I think that we, in the end, a lot of our conversations have been about technology. So it's a good idea in a way to move our work towards a very low level technology and examine the technology itself. So we don't have to use a network function. I think we can examine the technologies without, adding the complexity of the whole stack, right? But then Liam's point, is also very important, right? Remember, this is actually a work group. This is a SIG-1 meeting, right? The context of the whole work, we have to keep our eye on the ball. The whole reason we're trying to support the Helm technology is to allow a good vendor onboarding and packaging experience, right? So, so that's why we're doing all of this, right? So we do have to examine the low-level technology, but we have to always remind ourselves the context and why we're actually doing it. So evaluating the low-level technology has to be according to that criteria. But now I want to add, another tiny complexity, and here I might be representing John's perspective as well. We made an assumption here that the package is always one thing, that it's always like one Helm chart, or the alternative, one CRD with an operator, right? But there's nothing in Nefio technology that absolutely demands that. And as John points out, sometimes you could potentially deploy a network function without any operator and without any Helm chart, right? As a pure kept package that includes the resources. And in between, there's a spectrum, right? For example, you don't have to, a network function can include operators to handle various day 2 operations inside. It doesn't mean that it has to be packaged as an operator, right? It doesn't mean that you have to have a single CRD for the entire network function and an operator that deploys all the resources, right? I think that's a very viable way to deploy, right? And I think Nefio does support that. And I think it goes very well with our 100% KRM and kept package approach, right? I don't think there's anything in that requires operators or requires one operator for everything. So I think we need to make sure that we're not.
Yeah, so we certainly we should support that. So if we have a tools that can translate Helm plus their values YAML input into kept package, that would be one of the functionalities of the SDK that would allow us to. They would basically completely skip the operator, which also give rise to the fact that they probably would be losing out on other Nefio features also. But then it is supported. While this is nice, I personally sort of question because we're doing Helm because we believe there's a Helm chart lifecycle that would be continued by the vendors, and they may want to continuously updating and onboarding using this. But then at the same time, if they do conversions and maintaining their package in addition to the Helm charts that they use outside of Nefio, it may not be as vendor friendly.
Right. There's a bottom line here for me, and that is that Helm is a legacy technology. Yes, we are including it into, and we want to support it in Nefio, but Nefio is designed in a way that's not like Helm, right? Ket packages are very different from Helm charts, and conceptually, and I think even philosophically. So to an extent, let's not, I guess I'm trying to tell all of us that, let's not treat this as the way to do it. Yes, Helm is becoming to an extent a first-class citizen in Nefio, and I think we all agree that we need I would say first-class support for Helm and Nefio for Helm onboarding.
Yeah.
But it's not
basis,
necessarily.
it's not
Anyway,
when we talk about transition, we're not saying that we'll drop Helm support, at some point. We definitely can see a world where it coexists for a period of time, maybe for a very long time. So
I think
anyway.
we're over time.
Yeah, we're out of time. So sorry about that.
Yeah, out of time. I think I just realized why we don't have Akash. Ashish and Sandeep, because it's a holiday in India.
Well, Sandeep was in the observability meeting last night. So he said for Samsung it's only off yesterday. That's sad.
Okay.
That's sad. It's still not a very amazing time for them. So I could understand. Yeah, but sorry that was so late. I didn't know I was supposed to host the meeting today. Sorry.
No problem. Yeah, thank you so much. And
so I'll reach out on the on the Slack channels and talk to other stakeholders and see what we want to do next. At least the architectural documents and things. I think Fiacre, myself, and whoever else is interested, we should kick it off. To start working on.
Yeah. Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you. So.